Chapter 16. Namadarka said, Sir, the more I listen to your account of Sriguru's divine acts, the more I long to hear further. The zeal of Siddha was whetted by the former's noble yearning, and he went on, Son, at Mahurapura there lived a wealthy Brahmin named Gopinath. However much he could live in luxury and comfort, he was as distressed as though he had no cause for happiness. For he was not blessed with children at all. In fact, several children were born to him, but some of them died soon after their birth, while the rest expired after living for a few days. With a keen desire for offspring, they took to the worship of Lord Dattatreya. After some time, he was blessed with a son who survived. In gratitude to the Lord, they named him Datta. Under the lavish affection of the parents, the child grew up to be a handsome boy, endowed with all noble qualities. He was distinguished for his cultured mind and his peaceful demeanor. In the joy of bringing up the sweet boy, the parents forgot all the former griefs. The boy soon grew up like the moon in the brighter half of the month. When Datta attained the age of 8, his parents performed a sacred thread ceremony at an auspicious hour and put him on the course of Vedic studies. After he attained the age of 16, he was married to a girl named Savitri, who was well matched to him in beauty and noble qualities. Like the mythical divine pair Rati and Manmata, they were bound to each other with the strongest ties of mutual love and devotion. They were a passionate pair like the pair of mythical Chakravaka birds and were unable to bear the briefest separation from each other. They trod the path of righteousness, being prompted by the utmost care for each other's welfare. Such was her zeal in the service of her beloved that any number of hours of the hardest work did not tire Savitri in the least. She could not bear to be separated from him even for a short while. In his absence, such comforts, luxuries, and things of beauty like the flowers, the silvery light of the full moon, ornaments, and even delicious food proved unbearable to her, as she could not share them with him. Flower garlands were like thorns to her, and delicious food was like poison. As though the wicked goddess Fortune could not bear the sight of their perfect love and harmony for so long, young Datta was afflicted with tuberculosis. His parents were very anxious about his deteriorating health and tried all kinds of medical treatment they could provide. But, to their utter disappointment, nothing seemed to help. Finally, all medical men declared that his ailment was incurable. As days and months passed, young Datta was getting pale and emaciated, even like the moon wearing towards the approach of the new moon day. All the time he was very much troubled by the incessant shortness of breath, cough, and phlegm. In addition to the disease, the young man was very much worried about the happiness and health of his young wife and her bleak future if he were to die. This worry further beclouded his vitality. Soon he was reduced to a bundle of bones with hardly any flesh. Young Savitri too was very much worried about his condition and lost all her appetite and sleep. She could not bear to eat or sleep more than her beloved did, and soon she too was reduced physically and mentally into a mere shadow of her husband. The fetid smell that emanated from poor Datta was unbearable even for the physicians who treated him. No one except his wife could bear to be by his bedside or to attend upon him in any other manner. All the time, she was immersed heart and soul in keeping him as clean and comfortable as possible, by applying the finest scent to his foul-smelling body, massaging his aching limbs, and administering medicine at the appointed hours. Besides, she arranged for special prayers and worship for his recovery, with the help of learned priests. She even gave away valuable gifts to the pious and the poor for the love of God. But in spite of all this, the terrible disease did not abate even by a hair's breadth. Only the zeal of Savitri in the observance of the vow of Pativratya was growing more and more intense as days passed. Everyone who came to see and console the unfortunate couple and the aged parents of Datta said the jealous Fortune was working havoc with their life of happiness and love. Unable to bear the sight of the happy countenance of young Savitri in the prime of her youth, wicked Fortune, they said, has chosen to eclipse her radiant moon-like face. Gopinath and his wife, in the forenoon of their life, could not bear the sight of their sinking son, and, what was worse, the plight of their young daughter-in-law. Having despaired of his recovery and even of his survival, they felt it cruel to permit the young housewife to subject herself to such a terrible ordeal as serving such a sick husband. They warned her to keep away from him and to protect himself from the pestilent and pernicious infection, but she would not relent. Her young husband's health being so helplessly consumed by the raging disease, she felt she had nothing else to safeguard and protect, not even her health, beauty, or life. At last, one day, young Datta said to his parents, choking with sorrow, "This fell disease that consumes me must be the result of my wicked deeds in a former life. As such, I shall bear it stoically with fortitude and patience and accept the proper culmination." Turning to his young wife, he said, "In a previous life I must have been your sworn enemy, wreaking my vengeance in this fashion. It is time you accept the truth and forsake me. Go home to your own parents and try to live as happily as you can and forget all about me." The tender heart of the young housewife broke out in unrestrained sorrow, and she said amidst tears in a choking voice, "You are the Lord of my life, master of my destiny, and the only joy of my life. I have none beside you to live for. For a true wife, her husband is everything, but not her parents. I can no longer live as a separate individual the moment I leave your company. The spark of life will no longer hold my soul and body together. My deserting you will thus amount to my committing suicide, which is said to be most unpardonable of sins, and from which I shall never be saved. There still haunts in the innermost recesses of my being that the hope that divine mercy is all powerful and can work the seemingly impossible miracle of saving your life for my sake. I firmly believe that the more I heartily exert myself in your service and consume the brightness of my countenance in loving watchfulness in your attendance, the brighter the vital spark in you will grow. I believe that if God blesses a soul which is drowning in the ocean of misery, it shall in a trice be transported to the very pinnacle of joy and health. Such a merciful Lord is indeed our only refuge and is all powerful." With a stern resolve, she then humbly bowed and touched the feet of Datta's parents in reverence and said, "I learn that at Gandharvapura lives a saint, a very holy and powerful sannyasi named Sri Narasimha Saraswati. Something tells me from within that with his blessings and grace, my beloved will once again be restored to his former health and strength. If you accord your kind permission, I shall take my husband there." Gopinath and his wife too discovered a new strength and hope in her words and said, "If you have such unflinching faith, do take him there at the earliest possible. May the Lord bless you." The young couple once more bowed to them, received their blessing, and at once started on their final enterprise. The noble lady Savitri took all possible care to conduct her husband comfortably to Gandharvapura. She arranged a soft cushioned palanquin for him and instructed the bearers to walk slowly and steadily so as not to jolt her ailing lord. She lovingly held him against soft pillows and walked beside the palanquin. After trekking like this for several days across hills and forests, the party reached the neighborhood of their holy destination. But to her utter disappointment, she found that her husband was dead. Her only hope being thus thwarted and the only basis of her existence knocked out, she found nothing to live for. With the flames of suppressed grief raging in her heart like a volcano, she took the final resolve to end her own life too. The natives of that place, who were helpless witnesses of her dire misfortune, had somehow managed to dissuade her from such a precipitate act of despair. She was shocked to the very core of her being and did not know what else she could do next. Such a forlorn existence seemed utterly meaningless and unbearable for her. Soon the imprisoned grief burst out thus in loud wailing. "My dear, why have you deserted me like this? Whither have you left? If you do not return to this body and give us cheer and comfort, neither your father, mother, nor I, your dear wife, can survive, and you will incur the sin of killing us all. Is it not said in the Shastras that if you have no sons, your sacred debt to your ancestors would go undischarged? Besides, you have not even instructed me as to where I should spend the remaining days of my widowed life. What is more, how can I see your parents with my widowed countenance? Now that I am a widow, people henceforth consider the very sight of my face an ill omen. Alas, my plight is like that of a creature which has come to a river to slake its thirst, but which is instead devoured by a cruel crocodile on its very banks, or like a weary traveller who is crushed to death by the sudden fall of a tree underneath which he sought to repose, or like a cow that having come to graze was killed by a tiger, or like a devotee who was crushed to death by the fall of the shrine to which he came to seek divine protection. I have come for the darshan of Sriguru and to seek his protection for my ailing husband. But I lost my husband even as I approached the place. O Sriguru, fearing that you will be constrained to grant health for my ailing husband, have you chosen to rob him of his life's sparks even sooner? If you mean that it is not in your power to ward off my husband's fell disease, to whom else shall we turn for protection? Have you achieved any greatness or glory by such a deed as this? Now I shall carry the news of this great achievement of yours to the other worlds. O Mother, Goddess Gauri, have you chosen to forget all the woes which I assiduously observed all through my life in your honor? What has happened to your power and mercy that can annihilate the misfortune of widowhood? Alas, all the suspicious signs of a housewife have been heartlessly robbed from me by death. As the ship of my life danced blissfully on the bosom of the ocean of life, the terrible whale called death has gulped the very bark of my holiness as a housewife. Wailing thus, she again and again recalled every word and gesture of her late dear husband and sank ever deeper in grief and fell on his cold, dead body in boundless fondness. As Savitri thus was lost in the depths of grief, an ascetic wearing rudrakshas and vibhuti and holding a trident in his hand with long matted hair approached her from among the crowd and addressed her thus: My daughter, why do you wail so sorely? Quiet yourself. Don't you know that the dead will never return despite all our grief and wailing? After all, death is natural to all creatures, and our worldly relations are only tentative and transient. It is like two birds coming together on a tree for a night's rest, and the next morning each of them goes its own way. Again, it is like two logs of wood drifting together down a stream. The next moment, stray wave parts them again. So too, souls come together in this life just by an accidental coincidence of circumstances. Such indeed is the relationship of a wife and her husband too. Else if there be any abiding relationship between the two, you should be able to say whose wife you were in your previous life. If you reflect deeply, you will realize that no one in this world is essentially related to any other in any manner whatsoever. For the spirit within us, which is our essential self, is all-pervading, beyond birth and death. When it is associated with the physical structure made of 5 material elements, it loses sight of its true nature and wrongfully identifies itself as an individual and claims someone as its husband and some other as its father and so on. When you consider deeply, you will at once realize that all such feelings and emotions are merely our mental creations projected by our basic ignorance. In itself, the individual soul is without form. When it is associated with the 3 modes of nature, sattva, rajas and tamas, the soul is individualized. It falsely identifies itself with the material structure which it enlivens and thus gets caught in the web of joys and sorrows. But when you consider these with discrimination, it will be clear to you that the birth of the body is not the birth of the soul, nor does the death of the body constitute the death of the soul. When an individual is endowed with a perfect intellect, he will be able to penetrate beneath the web of illusion and thereby break it asunder. One may mistake a flower garland for a snake in semi-darkness, but once a light is fetched to examine it, that illusion ceases and the true nature of the garland is revealed. Similarly, till one attains true wisdom, the phenomena of birth and death seem real, and in its turn the soul seems to be subject to the pairs of life experiences like joy and sorrow. Therefore, one must pull together one's own intellect, strength of steadfast understanding, and thus cross the delusion of sorrow and suffering once and forever. Such a crisis in life as this is the most opportune occasion for it. If by your inadvertence we let slip the priceless opportunity, namely this human birth, it is hardly possible to get such another again. Grief-stricken Savitri passively listened to his discourse, and when he concluded, she put forth her own argument. I have set out in the long trek to this place, leaving all my kith and kin at home, in great hope of my husband's recovery. But even on the way, he breathed his last. Now I am utterly helpless, and you are my only guide. Show me a way out of my dire calamity. The compassionate sadhu replied, a devoted wife needs no complex form of sadhana or spiritual discipline to attain the true object of life, that is, wisdom of the self. Loving service and devotion to her husband is in itself the supreme path for her. Sage Brihaspati has taught thus. The whole of the phenomenal existence will come under the control of a pativrata. The lady who ever attends on her husband like a shadow and serves him with all her love and looks upon such loving service of self-dedication has her spiritual vow. She who, in loving reverence, spontaneously partakes of the washings of her husband's feet has the holy water of Ganga and cannot relish any food other than her husband's leftover as consecrated food. She who receives his orders as the holy writ, such a one never loses her composure whenever he gets angry, but on the other hand calms him down with all the love she can command. Such a one is a pativrata. There is nothing she cannot accomplish in this world. Such a one never fritters her precious time in light and frivolous courtesy calls on her neighbors and acquaintances. She never communicates anything to her kith and kin, her own kith and kin, without the knowledge of her husband. Even if he happens to be weak, poor, or even given to immoral ways such as pativrata, such a pativrata never wavers in her faith that he is the embodiment of the divine, but serves him accordingly. The customary and auspicious accessories of a housewife like turmeric and kumkum are to her the most precious and dear ornaments, for they are said to be most conducive to her husband's well-being. She knows no comfort of her own besides the happiness, his happiness and comfort. On the other hand, a woman who opposes and contradicts her husband will be born in her next life as a bitch. A housewife who abuses him will be born as an owl. She who cares to appease her palate with delicious food of her own liking and is unmindful of her husband's tastes will be born as a pig. The wife who speaks angrily and harshly to her husband will be born dumb in her next birth. She who threatens and warns her husband will be reborn as a tigress. An adulteress and unfaithful wife will be reborn as a worm or insect. My daughter, Shastras lay down that the ideal duty of a housewife on the death of her husband is the sahagamana, that is, putting an end to her own physical existence through self-immolation on the funeral pyre of her husband. Or, as an alternative, she may live on, strictly observing the vows of widowhood. It consists in shaving off her head, sleeping on bare earth, taking food only during the day and abstaining from the use of such luxuries as the betel and nut, and the use of materials enjoined by the Shastras for a housewife. She must wear only a white garment at all times. During the holy months of Kartik, Magh and Vishaka, taking the special holy bath every day and observing the vow of Chandrayana, she must spend the rest of her life in listening to devotional accounts of the divine acts of the Lord. She must scrupulously protect her chastity and also her natural charms from the notice of the others. I have just recounted to you only the regulations that were laid down by sage Brihaspati. You may choose Sahagamana if you like, for thereby you will be able to save your husband from the kingdom of death, Yamaloka, and elevate him along with you to heaven. Even the gods will honor and obey the wish of such a great Pativrata. Savitri listened attentively and said, Revered sir, I am in the prime of my youth, and it is safer for me to perform Sahagamana. The sadhu was very much pleased and said, Pious one, you have well said. As you have come a long way for the darshan of Sriguru, first of all, pay your respects to him. Then take the holy dip in the river, put on a clean garment, and give away the materials that should be used by a housewife to pious couples as tokens of your heartfelt repentance for the sins of a former life which have brought you now into such a plight. Take these rudrakshas and wear them around your neck. Take this holy ash and apply it to your body. Then besprinkle your late husband's body with the holy washings of Sriguru's feet, and then perform Sahagamana. So saying, he gave her some rudrakshas and holy ash and then went away. Then accordingly, Savitri gave away the sad gifts to pious Brahmin couples and then said to her companions, Go home. Henceforth, Parameshwara, Lord Shiva, and his consort, Goddess Parvati, are my parents. I shall join them only, but don't divulge to the aged parents of my sad calamity. Else they would at once die of the grief. Tell them that both of us are faring well here. After sending them away, she picked up the fire for her husband's funeral and her own Sahagamana and boldly walked at the head of the bearers of the dead body. With all her beauty of youth, the steadfast religious devotion to her late husband, which informed her moral courage and zeal to commit Sahagamana, she looked like Parvati of yore, proceeding for her tapas to win the hand of Lord Shiva in eternal union of marriage. All the amazed spectators marvelled at her boldness and pativratya. She felt she had not fully enjoyed the bliss of wedded life, and who was still in the bloom of her youth, was surely blessed in that she is sure to uplift even her entire race in public esteem. They accordingly glorified her virtue. She arrived at the cremation ground, bowed before the sacred fire, and duly worshipped the housewives who had assembled there. Then she reflected deeply on the teaching of the sadhu and wore the rudrakshas round her neck. She then besmeared her body with the holy ash given by the sadhu, took the blessing and permission of the Vedic Pandits. Chanting verses in praise of Sriguru, she then proceeded to the Sangama. All along the way, she mentally addressed Sriguru thus, O thou Supreme Spirit, you are the bestower of everything, the owner and Lord of creation, the sole refuge of all pious souls, the ocean of mercy. You are manifest as the Holy Trinity. Hitherto, countless mortals like me have been getting all these wishes fulfilled just by an iota of thy grace. Now I too shall fulfill my object and take your fame even to the very heaven. Till now, many dead people were restored to health by the power of thy presence. Many that were caught up in terrible cries could thus win freedom from fear. The poor and wretched were blessed with the wealth, and the ignorant ones gained knowledge. In such a holy place as this, today, I shall attain spiritual identity with you, along with my husband through Sahagamana. Glorifying the Lord in this fashion, she quickly arrived at the Sangama and bowed to the divine feet of Sriguru. Sriguru greeted her with a smile and blessed her, saying, May you be blessed with the long life of a housewife. May you give birth to 8 children who would become as famous as Ashtavasus. The assembly of devotees who waited on him were all amazed at the impossible blessing, and said, compassionately informed him of the young lady's plight. Sriguru said, in a stern voice, "My word shall never go in vain. Fetch the dead body here." In the meanwhile, some Vedic Pandits arrived and worshipped the master, chanting the Rudra mantras. Soon after, the dead body was fetched and kept on the ground in front of him. Sri Guru cast a searching glance at it and muttered the Rudra mantras and sprinkled holy water on it. At once it was revived, and young Datta sat up like one awakened from deep sleep. Young Savitri was beside herself with joy and wonder. Her eyes filled with tears of joy, she at once prostrated at Sri Guru, ran up to her dear husband and recounted him all that had happened. Datta too was immensely happy, and he, along with his wife, heartily glorified the divinity of Sri Guru. All the people who had gathered there loudly hailed the master. However, one among the crowd was jealous and cunning in his skepticism. He wryly remarked, "Why glorify the sannyasi? God's decree that was subtly written on the brow of Datta is being realized at the proper time. He came back to life only as per the divine writ. How can this sannyasi be now credited with such a miracle?" Sri Guru turned to the man and said, "In fact, the Creator had ordained only 30 years as the span of Datta's life in the present birth. He shall live 100 years in his next birth. Now I have exchanged the one for the other, so that Datta can live for 100 years in this life and only 30 years in the next one." So saying, by his mere look, he granted the mystical knowledge of threefold time to the skeptic and enabled him to see for himself that original divine writ of the Creator. When the man was convinced, all the people around once again hailed Sri Guru. The latter turned to the happy young couple and blessed them, saying, "May you live long together with wealth and universal fame." Pleased with the blessing, the young pair took their holy bath at the Sangama and duly worshipped the master. Just then the sun set. The master attended to the twilight prayers, and returned to his mutt with the devotees.